This blind old man was able to see things that only those who have faith and hope in God are capable of perceiving. In a secluded corner, in a small village nestled between vast fields and mountains that faded into the horizon, lived Joseph, an old man who, despite his many years and the loss of his sight, continued to be a man of restless spirit and full of stories marked by wisdom and emotion. Joseph, once known for the depth with which he perceived the world, found himself immersed in a sudden darkness, which occurred on a gray autumn morning, stripping him of colors and forcing him to seek the light that no longer touched his eyes. The silence of that autumn morning carried with it the omen of a great change. The wind whispered through the yellowed leaves, gently depositing them on the damp ground, while Joseph, still in his bed, felt the first rays of sun warming his face wrinkled by time. His fingers, already trembling with age, slid across his face in search of that comforting warmth, until the awareness of complete darkness invaded his being like an unexpected storm. At that moment, the world he had always known collapsed. The vibrant colors of the small garden he cultivated with such care, the deep blue of the sky he so admired at dusk, the delicate features of the faces of his loved ones, everything turned into memories that seemed increasingly distant, like stars that gradually fade in the firmament. At first, despair took hold of his heart. His hands, once firm and precise, now groped uncertainly through space, seeking references in a world that had suddenly become strange and hostile. The simplest and most everyday objects became enigmas, to be deciphered, and each step turned into an act of courage permeated by the fear of the unknown. "Why now, my God? Why do you abandon me when I most need to see the way?" Joseph cried out in his lonely nights, while silent tears marked his wrinkled face, witnesses of a life full of struggles and achievements. This sudden loss of vision made him see the world in a completely different way, through sounds, smells, and touch, but without the delight of the nuances of twilight or the radiant glow of the stars. The singing of birds at dawn, once just a compliment to the beauty of the sunrise, became a complex and revealing symphony. The aromas of the flowers in his garden, which before only accompanied their colors, now told detailed stories about the life that pulsed around him. Joseph's calloused hands, which for so many years had shaped wood in his carpentry workshop, now rediscovered the world through touch. The texture of objects, the temperature of surfaces, the subtle vibrations that ran through the ground. All this composed a new language that he was slowly beginning to decipher. However, despite these new discoveries, the persistent darkness weighed on his soul like a leaden cloak. The simplest tasks became almost insurmountable challenges. Eating without spilling food, dressing appropriately, walking through the rooms of his own house. Each activity required a concentration and effort that left him exhausted at the end of the day. More painful than the loss of independence was the loneliness that blindness had brought with it. The neighbors, who used to visit him frequently to hear his stories and seek advice, now seemed distant, perhaps embarrassed by his new condition, or simply unable to understand how to communicate with someone who no longer shared the same perception of the world. The nights became particularly difficult. The silence and darkness seemed to merge into an oppressive entity that suffocated his hope. The dreams, when they came, were full of vibrant images that only accentuated the pain of waking up to the somber reality. It was in this moment of helplessness and uncertainty that the old man decided to embark on a path in search of a new faith, a rescue of his essence, and a sign that could restore the inner light that guided him. The decision did not come suddenly, but after a particularly difficult night, when the weight of the darkness seemed unbearable. "If I can no longer see the world with my eyes, I must learn to see it with my soul," he murmured to himself as he groped for his old cane, a companion on so many walks along the mountain trails. The village legend told, among the elders, about the occasional presence of an enigmatic pilgrim, whose passage was announced by moonlit nights. This being, later identified as Master Valentine, was a traveler of gentle words and long journeys, who carried with him teachings of faith and the conviction that, even in the deepest darkness, a spark of light lies waiting to be discovered. Joseph remembered the stories he had heard in his youth, when the elders gathered around the fire to share the tales that kept the collective memory of the village alive. They spoke of a man who belonged to no specific place, but who seemed to understand the mysteries of the universe. They said that those who met him never remained the same, for his words had the power to transform the deepest despair into renewed faith. He appears when the full moon illuminates the ancient stone temple in the hills, Joseph's grandmother used to say, with eyes shining with reverence. But only those who truly need his counsel manage to find him. Moved by a hope that defied his fears, Joseph gathered his strength to meditate and embark on an inner journey that would make him confront loneliness, pain, and fear, driven by the desire to find a new way of seeing the world that did not depend on physical vision. The first days were of intense frustration. Accustomed to relying on sight to orient himself, Joseph constantly stumbled, even inside his own house. His fingers knocked over objects, his mouth tasted foods he did not expect to find on his plate, and his body collided painfully with furniture that seemed to change position at every moment. How can I find a way out of myself when I can't even find the way out of my house? He lamented, feeling increasingly trapped in a prison of darkness. However, necessity is the mother of adaptation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Joseph began to develop a mental map of his surroundings. His ears became more sensitive to the echo that objects produced in the environment. His touch began to recognize textures and shapes with increasing precision. His sense of smell learned to distinguish the different rooms by their characteristic odors. As he gained confidence in his movements inside the house, Joseph ventured to explore the small garden that surrounded his dwelling. There, among the plants he had cultivated for decades, he found a new kind of connection with the world. The touch of the soft petals, the pungent aroma of rosemary, the sweet taste of strawberries picked directly from the plant. All this created a sensory kaleidoscope that, although different from vision, was equally rich and revealing. It was in this garden, while his hands carefully caressed the leaves of an old olive tree, that Joseph had his first epiphany. Light is not only in the eyes, he thought, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin, but in every sense that connects us to the world, in every beat of the heart that affirms our existence. As this understanding matured in his spirit, Joseph felt compelled to expand his journey beyond the safe limits of his property. Using his cane as a guide and support, he began to walk the familiar paths of the village, rediscovering them through his other senses. The local market, once a festival of colors to his eyes, revealed itself to be a symphony of voices, aromas, and textures. The metallic sound of coins changing hands, the pungent aroma of spices displayed in wicker baskets, the rough touch of fabrics traded by itinerant merchants, everything composed a sensory tapestry as rich as the visual one he had lost. His walk, Joseph encountered numerous characters who became lights on this turbulent path. The first interactions were difficult, marked by shyness on both sides. The villagers, uncertain how to behave in the face of his new condition, alternated between an excessive pity that irritated him and a respectful distance that saddened him. "You don't need to change the way you talk to me," Joseph said with a gentle smile. "I am still the same man. I just see the world differently now." Gradually, the barriers dissolved and genuine relationships began to flourish. Among these new bonds, 3 people in particular became fundamental in his journey of rediscovery. Mary, a young woman troubled by the absence of a loved one but who, with her serene faith and tender smile, made hope spring in afflicted hearts. Joseph met her when he stumbled near the village church, and she promptly supported him, preventing his fall. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked with a voice that sounded like music to the old man's ears. A perfect combination of sincere concern and respect. "I am learning to fall and get up again, my dear," Joseph replied, accepting the arm she offered him as support. In the following weeks, Mary became a constant presence in his life. She came to visit him almost daily, bringing small gifts, a freshly baked bread, flowers picked in the field, stories of her daily life. In return, Joseph offered her something equally valuable, full and genuine attention. "My father passed away 2 years ago," Mary confided one afternoon, while they both sat on the wooden bench in the garden. "Since then, Mom can barely pronounce his name without tears coming to her eyes." "The pain of absence is like a weight we carry," Joseph replied, extending his wrinkled hand until he found hers. "Over time, it doesn't necessarily become lighter, but we learn to strengthen ourselves to carry it." Mary, who had initially come to offer help to the blind old man, found in him a comfort she did not expect. The serene faith that emanated from Joseph, even in his seemingly disadvantaged condition, inspired her to face her own challenges with renewed hope. "You have lost your sight, but you see things that many with open eyes will never see," she once told him, with sincere admiration in her voice. Joseph smiled, touched by the young woman's insightful observation. Perhaps true vision begins when we close our eyes to the outside world and open the eyes of the soul. Anthony, a sculptor whose art transformed pain into touching expressions, carving figures that seemed to embody the rescued hopes of his own life. The encounter with this artist occurred in a peculiar way. When Joseph, guided by the rhythmic sound of a chisel working wood, found his workshop on the outskirts of the village. "Can I feel what you sculpt?" Joseph asked, standing at the entrance of the small stone building from which emanated the characteristic smell of freshly worked wood. There was a moment of silence, followed by the sound of tools being placed on a surface. "Come in, sir," replied a deep and warm voice. "My sculptures thank you for hands that truly appreciate them." From this invitation, a friendship was born based on mutual respect and a shared understanding of the transformative power of art. Anthony allowed Joseph to explore his creations with his hands, patiently describing the details that his fingers could not fully capture. "This is an eagle about to take flight," the sculptor explained, guiding the old man's hands over the polished surface of the wood. "See how the wings are tense, storing energy for the initial thrust, while its fixed gaze already contemplates the distant horizon." For Joseph, these sessions were moments of profound connection with the beauty he thought he had lost forever. Through touch, he rediscovered shapes, textures, and emotions crystallized in the wood by Anthony's skilled hands. "How did you start sculpting?" he asked once, while his hands delicately explored a representation of the Virgin Mary with the baby Jesus in her arms. The silence that followed had an almost tangible weight. When he finally answered, Anthony's voice was choked with contained emotion. "I lost my wife and our child during childbirth," the sculptor revealed. "The pain was so intense that it threatened to destroy me. Then, one night in despair, I took a piece of wood and a knife, not to end my life as I had considered, but to try to give shape to what I felt inside." Joseph nodded, deeply understanding the cathartic power of creation. "You transformed your pain into beauty." "Yes," Anthony confirmed. "Each sculpture is a part of me that breaks free, a piece of suffering that transmutes into something that can touch other souls." And Clara, a healer whose hands and words contained an almost mystical power, capable of soothing deep wounds and restoring calm to troubled hearts. The meeting with this extraordinary woman was arranged by Mary, concerned about the rheumatic pains that tormented the old man on cold nights. "She knows the secrets of plants like no one else," the young woman explained as she guided Joseph along a winding path that led to a small house set apart from the village. "They say her hands have the gift of healing." Joseph, always open to new knowledge and experiences, let himself be led with curiosity. The smell of Clara's house reached him even before they crossed the threshold. A complex mixture of dried herbs, essential oils, and the comforting aroma of tea always ready to welcome visitors. "I was expecting you," said a soft voice, aged by time but retaining a melodious quality that immediately conveyed calm. "The wind told me that a man would come who has lost the light of his eyes, but is finding the light of his soul." In the months that followed, Clara became not only a healer for his body, but a guide for his spirit. Her teas and ointments relieved his physical pains, while her wise words offered balm for the invisible wounds that still bled within him. "Blindness of the eyes can be a blessing in disguise," she once told him, while applying a poultice of herbs to his aching back. "Many spend their entire lives seeing only the surface of things, without ever contemplating their true essence." Clara taught him to listen to the voice of the earth, to feel the vibrations of plants, to understand the cycles of the moon and how they affected not only the tides, but the moods and energies that permeated all living things. Close your already blind eyes and open the eyes of your soul, the healer instructed during their meditation sessions. Visualize not with the mind that recalls past images, but with the heart that perceives eternal truths. Each of these encounters served as a mirror for Joseph, revealing that true vision does not reside in the eyes, but in the spirit of those who have learned to feel and understand the invisible. Mary showed him that youth and old age can find common ground when there is openness to the genuine exchange of experiences. Anthony taught him that pain, when it does not destroy us, can be transformed into expressions of beauty that transcend individual suffering. And Clara revealed to him the mystical paths that connect the material world to the spiritual, expanding his perception beyond the limits imposed by physical blindness. As he continued his journey, the old man learned to listen to the whisper of the wind, to perceive ancestral messages in the murmurs of the streams, and to interpret the subtle gestures of nature as signs of universal benevolence. The rustling of leaves in the wind became a code to be deciphered. The singing of birds, announcements of changes in time and space. The perfume of flowers, precise indicators of the seasons and the cycles of the earth. The world has always spoken, Joseph reflected as he walked with his cane along the bank of the stream that cut through the village. But I was too busy looking to truly hear it. This inner journey provoked a profound transformation, where darkness ceased to be seen as a relentless punishment and began to represent an opportunity for self-knowledge, for the discovery of a sharpened inner perception, where faith strengthened with each step. The night that once terrified him with its mantle of impenetrable darkness became an invitation to introspection, a sacred moment of communion with the silence that revealed hidden truths during the hustle and bustle of the day. In his nightly meditations, guided by the techniques learned from Clara, Joseph began to glimpse not images formed by physical light, but luminous understandings that transcended ordinary vision. They were perceptions that could not be described in conventional visual terms, but that conveyed profound knowledge about the nature of existence and its purpose in the world. The pain that had initially enveloped him transformed into the gateway to a new perspective, where the absence of physical light gave way to an illumination that came from the heart, capable of capturing the delicacy of each emotion, the intensity of feelings, and the subtlety of thoughts. Suffering, when embraced with acceptance instead of resistance, revealed itself to be a rigorous but fair teacher who led him through paths of understanding that he would never have trod in his previous comfort. Pain is inevitable, he used to say to the young people who now came to seek his advice, attracted by his serenity and wisdom. But suffering is optional. When we accept pain as part of the journey, it loses its power to paralyze us and transforms into fuel for our evolution. As the seasons passed, Joseph became a beloved and respected figure in the village. His house, once a solitary refuge where he hid from the pity of others, transformed into a meeting point where people of all ages came to seek advice, share stories, or simply enjoy the peace that emanated from his presence. Mary continued to be a frequent visitor, but now she brought other young people with her, eager to hear the stories and teachings of the old man who saw with his soul. Anthony occasionally appeared with a new sculpture, asking for Joseph's sensitive opinion, whose hands had developed an almost supernatural perception to detect imperfections or potentialities in the worked wood. Clara came less often, limited by her own advanced age, but maintained with Joseph a spiritual connection that transcended the need for constant physical encounters. Despite this apparent fullness, something still troubled the old man's heart. The stories about the mysterious Master Valentine continued to echo in his thoughts, especially on nights when the full moon illuminated the sky, announcing the possible presence of the enigmatic pilgrim. Could he show me something I haven't yet discovered for myself? Joseph wondered, feeling that his journey, although rich and transformative, had not yet reached its final destination. It was then that, on one of those full moon nights, Joseph felt an inexplicable call, an urgency that impelled him to leave the comfort of his home and venture along the trails that led to the ancient stone temple in the hills. It was a dangerous journey, even for someone with perfect vision. For a blind old man, it seemed almost impossible. However, something within him, a certainty that transcended common logic, assured him that he would find the way, that each step would be guided by a wisdom greater than his fear or his physical limitations. "I will go with you," Mary offered when he shared his intention. "I know those trails well." Joseph smiled gratefully but shook his head in negation. "This is a journey I must make alone, my dear. Some revelations can only be received in the complete silence of solitude." And so, armed only with his faithful cane and a small bag containing water and bread, Joseph began his ascent to the hills on the night illuminated by the full moon. Each step was an act of faith. Each movement an affirmation of trust in the path that revealed itself beneath his feet. Curiously, despite the perpetual darkness in which he lived, Joseph felt strangely guided during that journey. The ground beneath his feet seemed to communicate with him, alerting him to loose stones or treacherous roots. The gentle wind on his face indicated changes in the direction of the trail, while the distant sound of the stream served as a constant reference. The culmination of this narrative occurred on a serene night, shrouded in moonlight, when Joseph, guided by his renewed hope, found Master Valentine in an ancient stone temple, whose walls carried the memory of miracles and lessons from past lives. The climb had been arduous, testing the limits of his aged body, but the determination of his spirit had prevailed over physical fatigue. Upon reaching the temple, a simple but imposing structure whose stones had been laid by anonymous hands, centuries ago, Joseph felt a presence that made his heart race with anticipation. "Welcome, seeker of light," said a serene voice that seemed to emanate not only from a specific point, but from the entire environment around him. "Your journey here has been long, not only in distance but in transformation." Joseph leaned on his cane, breathing deeply to calm his racing heart. "Are you Master Valentine?" he asked, feeling simultaneously foolish and hopeful, like a child, before a mystery greater than his understanding. A soft and welcoming laugh filled the space. "Some call me that. Others give me different names. What matters is not what they call me, but what they seek when they look for me." Joseph felt a gentle hand touching his shoulder, guiding him to a stone bench where he could rest his weary legs. The touch had a strangely familiar quality, as if he had known it for a long time. "I seek to understand the purpose of darkness in my life," Joseph confessed, feeling that before this enigmatic being there was no need for dissimulation or half-truths. "I have learned much since I lost my sight, discovered worlds within me that I did not know existed, but I still wonder why." It was there, in that refuge of spirituality and silence, that the wise man conveyed the transformative message. Darkness was not the enemy, but rather the conductor, who taught him to value the inner light, the one that emanates from faith, love, and a sincere encounter with the divine. "You ask the wrong question," Master Valentine replied gently. "Don't ask why, for that keeps you trapped in the past in a moment that cannot be changed. Ask what for. What is the purpose? What is the lesson? What is the possible growth from this experience?" The silence that followed was filled only by the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind and the distant hoot of an owl. Joseph absorbed the master's words, feeling them resonate in increasingly deeper layers of his being. "The darkness of your eyes opened space for the light of your soul," Valentine continued, his voice now closer, as if he had sat down next to Joseph on the stone bench. "Many spend their entire lives seeing the external world perfectly, but remain blind to the essential truths that dwell within them. So my blindness was a gift?" Joseph asked, his voice trembling before the possibility that simultaneously frightened and liberated him. "Every challenge contains a hidden gift," the master replied. "It is up to us to decide whether to remain fixed on the obstacle or to seek the blessing it hides. You chose the most difficult path, but infinitely more rewarding, that of transformative acceptance." In a moment of revelation, Joseph understood that, even deprived of physical vision, his other senses awakened a perception capable of capturing the colors of the spirit and the harmony of the universe in a unique and surprising way. A profound understanding invaded him, not as an elaborate thought, but as a truth felt in every cell of his body. "We are more than our physical senses," he murmured, more to himself than to his interlocutor. "We are pure consciousness experiencing life through these imperfect instruments we call the body." "Exactly," Valentine confirmed, and Joseph could feel the smile in his voice. "And when one of these instruments fails, we have the opportunity to discover more subtle and profound faculties, which have always been present, but which we have neglected in our dependence on the physical." The rest of the night passed in a deep dialogue, where essential truths were shared not only through words, but through eloquent silences and understandings that transcended common language. Master Valentine spoke about the illusory nature of separation, about how all things are interconnected in an invisible but real web, about how each challenge faced with awareness elevates not only the individual, but all of humanity. When the first rays of sun began to warm the ancient stones of the temple, Joseph felt that something fundamental had transformed within him. The darkness remained present in his physical eyes, but an indescribable light illuminated his being from within, dissipating the last shadows of doubt or resentment that might still inhabit his heart. Upon leaving the temple, imbued with certainty and gratitude, the old man carried with him the conviction that every adversity, no matter how impenetrable it may seem, can be overcome with faith, perseverance, and the love that is cultivated within. The path back to the village curiously seemed easier than the ascent. His steps, once hesitant, now had the firmness of someone who knows exactly where he is going, not only in the physical terrain, but in the greater journey of existence. In the years that followed, Joseph became an almost legendary figure in the village and neighboring communities. His house was constantly visited by people seeking advice, healing, or simply the peace that emanated from his presence. Men of all ages, especially those in moments of crisis or transition, found in his simple words a beacon that guided them through the storms of life. "What should I do, Mr. Joseph? I have lost everything I built," a merchant once asked whose warehouse had been destroyed by a fire. Joseph, sitting in his rocking chair on the porch, smiled serenely. "You have lost what you had, not what you are. Your hands remain skilled, your mind sharp, your heart still beats with determination. Start again, but this time build on foundations that fire cannot consume. Honesty, generosity, a purpose greater than profit." His journey, sprinkled with encounters and epiphanies, became a symbol of resilience and inspiration, teaching that true light does not go out even when the outside world plunges into darkness. Mary, now a young woman, continued to be his most faithful companion, having decided to dedicate part of her time to recording the old man's stories and teachings so that they could inspire future generations. "You have transformed your darkness into light for so many," she told him one afternoon, while organizing the notes she took from their conversations. "It was not I who made this transformation, my dear," Joseph replied, his voice now more fragile with the weight of the additional years. "It was divine grace that worked through my acceptance. We are only channels. The light comes from a source much greater than us." Anthony, the sculptor, had created a series of pieces inspired by Joseph's journey, capturing in wood and stone the crucial moments of his transformation. One of these sculptures, representing a man with closed eyes but with a flame burning in his chest, was placed in the central square of the village as a symbol of the lessons that everyone had learned through the experience of the blind old man. "Art should serve as a bridge between the visible and the invisible," Anthony explained to visitors who admired his work. "Joseph taught me that the eyes can deceive us, showing only the surface of things, while the heart can penetrate to the essence of truth." Clara, despite her advanced age, continued to practice her healing arts, now assisted by apprentices to whom she transmitted not only the knowledge of herbs and ointments, but also the wisdom about the connection between body, mind, and spirit that she had refined through her long conversations with Joseph. "Illness often begins in the soul before manifesting in the body," she taught the young healers, repeating words she had shared with Joseph in their treatment sessions. Learn to listen not only to what the patient says, but also to what their silence reveals. The legend of Joseph's encounter with Master Valentine spread, growing and transforming like all orally transmitted stories, until it assumed almost mythical proportions. It was said that on the night of that encounter, an extraordinary light had been seen emanating from the ancient temple, so bright that it illuminated the hills as if it were broad daylight. Some claimed that Joseph had in fact regained his physical sight after that encounter, but had chosen to keep his eyes closed to the outside world, preferring the deeper vision he had discovered on his journey through darkness. Others maintained that Master Valentine was not an ordinary human being, but a divine messenger sent specifically to guide Joseph in his transformation. The old man himself smiled at these speculations, neither confirming nor denying, only reminding everyone that truth rarely fits into the words we use to describe it. As the years passed and Joseph's body became increasingly frail, his inner light seemed to intensify, as if the imminence of his final departure made the veil that separates the material world from the spiritual thinner. His teachings, once expressed mainly through words, now often dispensed with verbal language, transmitting themselves through a compassionate gaze, a gentle touch, a smile that contained the wisdom of many lives. On an autumn afternoon, very similar to the one on which he had lost his sight so many years before, Joseph felt that his time on this plane was drawing to a close. With a tranquility that impressed everyone around him, he made his final preparations, bidding farewell without drama or lamentation, but with the serenity of someone simply preparing for the next stage of a long journey. "Do not weep for me," he asked his friends who had gathered around his bedside. "What we call death is just a change of perspective, an expansion of the limited vision we have while trapped in this temporary body." On the night before his departure, many in the village reported having dreamed of Joseph, not as the frail old man who was saying goodbye, but as a radiant being who blessed them and assured them that he would continue to be present, in a different but equally real way. Mary, who had dozed off in a chair beside his bed, woke up startled shortly before dawn. "Mr. Joseph," she exclaimed, noticing a subtle change in his breathing. "Are you all right?" The old man smiled, his physical eyes permanently closed, but his inner gaze more vivid than ever. "Better than ever, my dear. I see everything now. The light, it's so beautiful." With these words, he breathed his last, departing with the same serenity with which he had faced the greatest challenges of his life. At the exact moment of his passing, they say that a particularly bright ray of sun burst over the horizon, casting a golden beam through the window of the room, as if the sky itself paid a final tribute to the one who had found light in the densest darkness. Joseph's funeral was a celebration of life such as the village had never witnessed. Instead of traditional mourning, an atmosphere of gratitude permeated the ceremony, with stories being shared about how the old man had touched and transformed countless lives. People from distant villages came to pay their respects, many bringing symbolic objects that represented the lessons learned through Joseph's example. A young man brought a lit lamp, symbolizing the inner light that never goes out. A father carried in his arms the small child that Joseph had helped to heal through his prayers. A woman placed on the coffin an olive branch, a tree that the old man so loved for its longevity and resilience. Anthony, the sculptor, created a special piece for Joseph's tombstone, a pair of open hands from which emerged a stylized flame, a symbol of the faith that illuminates even in the darkest moments. Mary planted a jasmine seedling near the grave, so that its sweet perfume would remind everyone of Joseph's constant presence, perceptible not through the eyes, but through the more subtle senses. In the years that followed, the story of the blind old man who found light in the darkness spread far beyond the borders of the small village. Travelers passing through the region carried with them the inspiring account, adding it to the repertoire of stories they shared on their journeys. Thus, Joseph's experience transcended geographical and temporal boundaries, becoming a universal archetype about the human capacity to transform adversity into spiritual growth. This story echoes as an eternal lesson, highlighting the importance of cultivating faith and hope to transform every challenge into a stepping stone towards redemption and the illumination of the Spirit. The old man's journey, marked by his efforts to see the invisible, is a testament that the brilliance of the soul is capable of dispelling shadows, restoring confidence, and revealing the face of a world where inner light prevails, regardless of external conditions. Today, when travelers ask about the statue in the central square of the village, that man with closed eyes but with a flame burning in his chest, the locals smile and begin to tell the story of Joseph, the man who lost his sight to find true light, reminding everyone that the greatest obstacles often hide the most valuable opportunities for transcendence. In every darkness dwells a dormant light, they say, quoting the words that Joseph so loved to repeat. It is up to us to choose between cursing the darkness or kindling the inner flame that never goes out. And so Joseph's journey continues to live on, not only as a memory of the past, but as a beacon that illuminates the path of all those who face their own moments of darkness, reminding them that with faith and perseverance, it is always possible to find light where others see only shadows.